I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And we are bringing you For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about the environment and ecology. We talk about how it affects you, your health, your wealth, your happiness, your family. And we do it, I think, with a little humor every now and then when we're lucky. And we do it in a way, we try to stay upbeat. We try to stay positive because there are solutions to all these problems. That's one thing. It's easy to forget when you're in the environmental movement that not only do we know the problem, in most cases we know how to solve the problem. And so we're going to be bringing you a great show today. We have a guest calling in, Dr. Enrique Gomez-Delcampo. He's going to talk to us about aquifers because he's a hydrologist at Bowling Green State University.
I did not even know hydrologists were a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Is that like under the geology or the biology department or what? I'm an aging faculty brat. I have these thoughts.
Well, he's in the environmental science department.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. And yes, but it's a branch of geology.
Okay.
Theoretically. So, but he'll be talking to us about aquifers, and it's just amazing. That's one of those things that's happening under your feet that you don't even know about, but like your life depends on it. So yeah, it's very interesting. So then we're going to hear from our sponsors, and then hopefully we will be hearing from you at this in this show at some point at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. Rebecca and I are happy to take your call on any kind of environmental or ecological issue or question. And we weren't able to have call-ins last week. We did a recorded show because I had to go off to Colorado, which was a very interesting experience. But we had a couple great recorded interviews, one with the head of the Alaskan Wilderness Society and the other with Dr. Helen Caldicott, who is just an amazing, globally known environmental figure. So that was cool. And one of the things that happened, though, I don't know if you noticed in the news this week, the Union of Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock ahead.
I saw that. Yep.
Yep. But we actually scooped everybody because Dr. Helen Caldicott said that in the interview that we aired last Sunday, and then it wasn't until the middle of this week.
Exactly.
So you heard it here first. Yeah. Right. And, that's not the first time that we basically scooped the world's media. We interviewed Marky Miller about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. We were one of the very first media outlets to do that. And then later on, she's had interviews, and, Lake Erie Bill of Rights has been talked about all over the world. But you heard it here first, again.
But that might be partly because in regards to environmental issues, sometimes the mainstream media has its head someplace it should not be.
Yeah, true.
Not because we are so brilliant.
Well, it could be because
right,
we're brilliant,
it could be,
know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was a very interesting trip to Colorado, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences there from an ecological point of view. Colorado's a boom town. You know, they are growing. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And one of the things that struck me was how young everybody was. You know?
Probably Denver he's talking about.
Yeah, Denver
Yeah.
specifically. Good. Yeah, Denver, Colorado. And they had something there which is an important ecological thing. They had a temperature inversion while I was there, which is a situation where you get a layer of hot or warm air over a layer of cold air, cooler air, and that cooler air gets stuck there. And so then what happens is all the smog, all the car exhaust, all the exhaust from the plants and so forth, manufacturing companies
Also stays there.
also stays there.
Oh, great.
And you get this really nasty layer. And I looked at my iPhone to check the temperature, and it said, basically it said be careful about breathing.
Oh, right,
because,
yeah.
The pollution levels were so high.
So you were all, I'm going to go on vacation in beautiful, scenic Colorado and fresh mountain air, yay, and then that happened.
Yeah, right. And it's just it's a reminder that we can't break these rules, that the rules of the ecological rules, the scientific rules, they can't be bent and broken the way some people are trying to put us into, we don't have to do this or we don't have to do that.
It's fine. We'll make more carrier pigeons.
Right. Well, but yeah, you can't.
And dodo birds and all that.
You can't argue with atmospheric chemistry, But so that was the big environmental negative I saw there in Denver. But there are some positives, and that is one thing I saw is that Denver has a fantastic mass transit system.
Yeah.
They've got light rail. You can ride from the airport to 30 miles outside of town just on the light rail for only $10. And they also have electric buses. They have a fleet of electric buses. And so, the infrastructure is there. And we've pointed out before that there's this direct connection between having good mass transit and having a vibrant economy. I mean, this is a point we like to press home, and it really is being demonstrated there in Denver, where the mass transit's great and the economy's booming, but most people still were just driving. Most people were still in their cars, adding to that smog, adding to that temperature inversion, and so it's a cultural thing more than a physical thing. Again,
right.
We know the solutions, and I loved riding the light rail. I mean, that's whenever I go to a city that's got public transportation, I try to use it, and it was just they have a really good one. And Columbus also has good public transportation, but Toledo, we used to have really good public transportation, and we have some public transportation now, but it could use a ton of improvement. As you know, Rebecca, as a user of Toledo's public
You're really better off
transportation.
getting a mule here.
Yeah. But one problem that they're having in Denver is that they have those electric buses are actually more expensive to run than the diesel.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't be, because electric actually is cheaper than diesel, than fossil fuel. But the problem is that they've allowed their utility to set electric rates, and the utilities are assigning rates not based so much on usage as they've created these tiers of charges. And they
just like we kind of did in Ohio this past week, there was an announcement that there's going to be a way higher registration fee for electric cars and hybrids if you own one.
Oh yeah, that's true.
For no reason,
well,
just for no good reason.
That's the state
right.
saying that we
right.
we hate electric diesel, or we hate hybrids and electric cars.
Yeah.
But this is the utility, the electric utility. The state of Denver has allowed the electric utility to set rates and set what they call demand charges for different tiers,
Right.
which means they're not actually paying. It's not so much that the electricity itself costs a ton of money, but the utility is charging for maintaining the capacity in case they need to use a lot more electricity than they do, and so they just tack these charges on, and so it's artificially.
Yeah.
It's an artificially high cost.
Basically just to discourage alternative energy.
Yeah, because if they were literally just charging for the cost of the electricity, the buses would be way cheaper. In fact, these demand charges that the utilities tacked on, 85% of the electric bill is the demand charge. So
oh my God.
Only 15% of what the city's paying for the electricity to run their electric buses is for the electricity.
Right.
So, yeah, and without that demand charge, it would be something like a third the cost of running on diesel. So
it's all just in case everyone in the Denver decides to ride the bus at once, except for actually it's still going to be the same number of routes and runs of buses. So
what the utility
just be fuller.
What the utility says it's in case everybody in Denver turns on all their electric appliances.
Okay.
And every light in the city of Denver at once.
How would this be the bus company's fault if that happened?
Well, it's not.
Well, why are they uniquely responsible for that?
But it's not just the bus company. It's any industrial user that the utility decides to put into this tier.
Alrighty.
And the utility decides who goes into what tier. So
kind of randomly.
Well,
not necessarily based on how much electricity you use.
Somewhat based on
okay.
it. I mean,
kind of, sort of.
But it's at their discretion which business goes into which tier, and they stuck the electric buses in this massive 85% charge tier. So again, it just shows
eye rolling from Becca.
The physical,
for those of you can't see out there in listener land.
But it shows there is a solution, and they're working on it in Denver. We got to give them credit.
Yeah.
They don't have the social part yet because most people are still driving instead of taking the terrific public transit.
It might help if it was cheaper, though. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, and cheaper is, better. They're actually considering going to free public transit.
Cool.
In Denver, which would be that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. The studies have shown that cities that have done that, the air pollution levels drop dramatically right away.
No doubt. Yeah.
But they're on their way. They're working on it in a way that a lot of other cities aren't. So, got to give them credit. So just wanted to sort of give you my view of. Oh, and the other interesting thing along the way. We drove there. It was a 20-hour drive from Toledo to Denver, and I was thinking we're crossing the Great Plains. We're going to see a ton of wind turbines, and we actually did see a ton of wind turbines in Iowa. They have lots and lots
Iowa's
of them.
on it.
Right. But Illinois, they don't. And then Nebraska, they don't. And Colorado had surprisingly few, too. But the Illinois and Nebraska, those are dominated by – Illinois is dominated energy-wise by the nuclear companies. Exelon is the biggest political influence in Illinois.
You just almost confuse the NRC with the nuclear industry for some strange reason. We did, maybe because they seem to say a lot of the same things, but
yeah. But it just really clearly shows, similar wind, similar topography, different political atmosphere, and that makes all the difference in terms of how much wind actually gets installed or not. So. Just something to remember.
About critters, did you see any critters?
We didn't see very many critters. No, we saw signs that we climbed a little mountain called Green Mountain, and we saw some signs saying be careful of rattlesnakes. But all we saw were some rabbits.
When I was in Colorado a few years ago, I saw a moose or an elk. I'm actually not sure which. It was a long way away.
Probably an elk.
Probably an elk, yeah. It was big, and so it looked very big even though it was far away. And lots of antelope, although contrary to their popular image, the ones I saw did not play. They were giant couch potatoes. Anytime you saw an antelope, it was lying down in a field, I guess, saving its energy in case a coyote came along or something like that, I'm guessing. Well, and it needed to get away fast.
Well, they are cute though. I mean, even when they're not playing. But that's enough of my trip to Colorado, because now we have our terrific guest on the air, Dr. Enrique Delcampo. Thank you so much for calling in.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's actually Gomez-Delcampo. It's all together. It's a long last name.
Okay, right. So it's Enrique Gomez-Delcampo, right?
Correctly.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you got it.
And so I'm sorry for messing it up there, but could you tell us a little bit about your credentials there? What your bona fides, as they say?
Sure. I'm a hydrologist / environmental engineer. That I work in consulting for several years in Mexico, here in the States, and also in Europe, in the Netherlands. And for the last 15 years, I've been faculty at Bowling Green State University in the School of Earth, Environment, and Society.
Okay, that's great. And we asked you on today to talk a little bit about aquifers, and just we wanted to start very basic. Just what is an aquifer? How do they work? And what's the relationship between the aquifer and, let's say, surface waters, rivers and lakes and streams?
Right, and you can see the main difference is we see water on Earth and fresh water, and we typically see we see the rivers, we see the lakes, the groundwater, we don't see it, right? And we sometimes people like to think that maybe groundwater is like underground rivers or something like that, and that's not the case, except when you have a karst, like when there's a lot of caves. So you can think of an aquifer like a sponge full of water. The difference with the sponge would be that all the water that it's there in the sponge is connected. All the water that's absorbing the sponge is connected. So if I put a straw next to the sponge and suck, use my mouth to suck the water out, it will all come out into my mouth, right? So there's connection between where the water is in that sponge. So you can think of that. That's a better idea of what an aquifer is, like that sponge that is holding all this water underneath the ground.
Okay. You're right. I thought it was like a big underground tank made of rock. So that's how I was picturing it in my head.
Right. And no, the water is being held in the spaces between the different formations. Typically, the good aquifers are sand and gravel, so there is big spaces between the material, so that's where the water is being held. So yeah, it's not like a big tank there or a big lake on the ground.
Right.
Okay, that's cool. So we have this big sponge full of water underneath us that's sort of supporting us and providing us with the water. And so what's the relationship between the water in the sponge and the waters that we do see, like lakes and streams and rivers?
Right. Well, there's one more classification or one more thing in aquifers, and you can have what they call confined aquifers and unconfined aquifers. You have confined aquifers are the ones that have a layer that doesn't allow water to move through above them. And the unconfined aquifers are the ones that don't have that layer, so water can move through from the surface down to the aquifers. Right? So you have ones that you have a straight connection between the surface and the aquifer itself, and ones that have a barrier that doesn't allow that water through. So in the unconfined aquifers, so there's always a connection between, say, a stream and the aquifer. So then you have what they call gaining stream and losing stream. So depending on the season, you can have, when you have unconfined aquifers, you can have streams that actually provide water to the aquifer, and then in the dry season, the aquifer is the one that maintains levels in the streams, because the aquifer actually brings water up to the streams. Those are the unconfined aquifers. Mm-hmm. Typically, those are not used for drinking water because they're very easily contaminated, right? Mm-hmm. And they're close to the surface. So the confined aquifers, the ones that have that sort of barrier protecting them, are the ones that are typically used for drinking water. And obviously, they're farther down, and the drilling has to go through that layer in order to get to the water. And also, those are the ones that typically call, or some of them can be called artesian, which means they're under pressure. So when you get to that water, then water comes out. You don't need a pump, let's say. So those will be the artesians.
I see. So a confined aquifer, then, the ones that are underneath this barrier that doesn't allow the aquifer water to mix with the surface waters, then do those have a way of getting recharged, or are they just that's a set amount of water inside that a confined aquifer, and once it's gone, it's gone?
They do.
Okay, so they can be recharged.
Well, okay. Nothing is simple, right?
Okay.
There are ones that are very deep, and then they may not have a recharge area. But those are very old aquifers, and those are usually not very good for drinking because they've been there for millions of years, and they have a lot of dissolved solids and, brine, salty.
Okay.
But typically, but those we sort of don't worry about them, right?
So safety tip: if the water is millions of years old, it's probably not good anymore.
If it says millions of years old on the bottle,
don't drink it. Okay, all right.
Yeah, don't drink it because it's just pure brine, right?
Okay.
So you do have recharge areas for confined aquifers, and this is because of the layers of the earth. They get fold and unfold, and so it may be an aquifer layer, but then it gets closer to the surface in another part of the land. Mm-hmm. And so when it rains over there, water has a way to get into the aquifer. Mm. So that's what it's called, or easier way to get in. So those are called the recharge areas.
Wow, okay.
So you do have recharge areas for confined aquifers. And it takes a geologic study to find out where are those recharge areas and, how you protect it. And that's why, for example, New York City, that has very good water quality, they get the waters, from an area they protected many, many years ago. They protected the watershed because that was the area that recharged their aquifers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right. Yeah, that's an impressive water system. I know that they get water from the Adirondack Mountains through huge tunnels that go, I think, almost 100 miles to the city, and it's excellent water. I've actually swum.
Yeah, they don't have.
I've actually swum in New York City's reservoir. Don't tell the people of New York City that. But
no.
So, all right. So
they do some treatment afterwards. But
oh yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad.
Minimal treatment though. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. So, all right. So we have these aquifers, these sponges underneath us, full of water, that are getting recharged. Some of them are getting recharged at some points. Some of them are surface aquifers that interact with the lakes and the streams.
Unconfined, huh?
And unconfined and confined. So what happens? Are there examples of people overusing aquifers, of draining the resource? Has that happened historically?
I think that's what happens most often because we have that out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And since, aquifers, we don't see them, and we just pump them until we can't pump anymore. So I think unfortunately, they tend to be overexploited, most aquifers. Just because I think that's what it is, out of sight, out of mind. And if nobody's done a study to see, okay, how much water is contained in this aquifer, how much we can get out and sustainably, then get exploited. It's very easy to do. Just like we did around here in the Wood County with oil, right, and the gas and the gas wells and all that stuff. That hey, we just get them all out, and then suddenly, well, there's not enough pressure, or there's not any gas left, so that's the end of it, right? So we do the same thing. We tend to do the same thing with aquifers, and I think it's because we don't see it. Right.
Are there other effects of draining an aquifer besides just no more water? I mean, does that do things to the topography?
Well, yes, depending on where the aquifers do. And, if you're close to the coast, like, say, Florida or something like that, and you keep pumping, then you get issues like what is called saltwater intrusion. So you actually pull water from the ocean into the aquifers, and then the aquifer gets all contaminated with salt water. Then it's ruined. And then when you're not close to the ocean, but you keep pumping, well, you're sucking water out of that sponge. So that sponge gets thinner and thinner and thinner. So the land above it will subside just because weight and pressure. Right? There's no water in there anymore to hold that weight of land above it, so you get compressed.
Okay.
And you see that examples in cities all over the world. Mexico City, it's like several meters and keeps sinking. Same thing in Jakarta. Even the Ogallala Aquifer, which is the largest aquifer in the U.S., and this is the Great Plains, and it's used for irrigation. Land subsidence being there is dramatic.
Is it turning into the Great Valley instead of the Great Plains, slowly but surely? So it's like kind of sinking.
Okay. So overdoing it on an aquifer can cause these problems. But are there any examples of sustainably harvested aquifers? Is there any place where they've actually looked at the recharge rates and said, okay, well, we can take this much, and then stayed within those bounds?
Yeah, there are some examples, but not, large aquifers. And this is what I think. Let me bring the Michindo aquifer here.
Okay.
Because the City of Bryan made that aquifer sole source petition to the EPA, I don't know, in 2007 or something like that, because they wanted to be able to protect that aquifer so they can use it sustainably.
Right. Let's just back up just for a second for our listeners. So we're talking about the Michindo aquifer, which is one of these confined aquifers that is
correct. It's a sand and gravel aquifer, and it's pretty large. I mean, it's it's obviously Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio, and it's about 9 counties, I think, it covers. And the City of Bryan is sort of smack in the middle of that area.
Okay.
So this is an aquifer that provides water, good water for all that area around, stream Northwest Ohio. And it's a good quality groundwater, not excellent, because the type of deposit here in the Midwest do have some sulfur and brine, but it's a good aquifer, and they would what I thought would be proactive in the sense that they wanted for the EPA to consider sole source aquifer so they can be protected and managed in a sustainable way.
Okay. So they're basically saying to the EPA, this is the only place we can get our water, so
Correct.
It's got to be protected or we won't have any water.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
That's how it all started, right?
Okay. And then what happened? Well, I know that now there's some proposals, like from the Northwest Ohio Water and Sewer District, to possibly tap that aquifer to give water to places like Perrysburg.
Right. That was that. Obviously, there's development, and we need water in order to have development. So, with the issues of Lake Erie and algal blooms and stuff, it's like, okay, what are other sources of water that we have? And one is that aquifer that's over there, and if you can pump it and bring water all the way over here, well, that allows for development, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the idea, that, okay, we can provide that source of water and make money out of it. And I think that's when people started jumping, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it sort of reminds me a little bit of, the Great Lakes Compact, that you have the water in the Great Lakes, and if you're outside of the watershed, that even if you're in the state that is in the Great Lakes, that you petition to have access to that water. So it's sort of the same thing. We don't know how good it is until we start seeing that people want to use it, right? And it says, oh, it's mine. And
right.
The problem is not sharing it, and it depends, and I think what the USGS is saying and is that they need to study to figure out how much water it is, how much you can pump out sustainably, because you take water out and you have to balance that with the recharge, right?
Right. Okay.
So that gives you an idea how much you can pump and the aquifers be sustainable. That means that you keep pumping for a long, long period of time without depleting the water, without having land subsidence, without all those things.
That sounds pretty sensible.
Correct, except that it takes money and it takes time, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because you have to drill a lot of wells around there to have an idea of where, how much water you can pump, and this is not a study that you will do 1 month, pump it, and then you figure it out, because it does change with the seasons, and depending on the years, how much water comes in as a recharge and all that. So you do have period of years that you have to study this aquifer to have a good sense of what is the amount of water that you can pump out. And it may be that this aquifer can provide water for those areas and still be sustainable. But the problem is that we don't know right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to do sort of the precautionary principle and says, okay, we're not going to do it until we know we could do it, right? So we study this. Unfortunately, it's always that on hindsight, right? It's like, oh, we want to do this. It's like, oh, yeah, but we need this information,
mm-hmm.
and we don't have it.
Right. Okay. Well, this has been pretty fascinating, Enrique, or Dr. Gomez-Delcampo.
Enrique, please. Yeah.
Enrique, okay. Well, this has been pretty interesting, Enrique. And Rebecca, did any questions occur to you while we were hearing about aquifers? And
I guess not. I was thinking a little bit about the Collingwood Springs neighborhood of Toledo, which was named after an actual spring where Victorians used to ride out from the city and flirt while pretending to care about their health. And now a water company, the Collingwood Water Company, has bottled it and capped it and bottled it. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So a spring is like an artesian well, except
right.
that it naturally comes up. Right.
Okay. So, all right. Well, thanks so much, Enrique.
You're very welcome.
This has been a great pleasure, and we're going to keep watching this whole Mission Doe aquifer situation, and maybe we can have you on again in the future when more information comes along.
I'm interested in what's happening, and I think it's good that we're starting to realize that we have to protect our resources, and there are people that are willing to put the time and effort to go to those meetings, public meetings, and say what they think. Mm-hmm. I think that's good.
Well, and I think one of the points we try to make on For a Green Future is that we're not advocating not using resources. I mean, we have to use resources. We need to drink water. We need to, but if we do it sustainably, if we do the studies and we have the science and we say, okay, it recharges at this rate, so we can take out at that rate, in the end, you actually end up with more water. If over time you end up with more abundance and you have a better quality of life if you do things in a green, sustainable way than if you just say, okay, let's put in a ton of wells and see what happens. So.
Yeah. I think we passed that point, right? That, we cannot just use our resources willy-nilly. We have to think about it and be careful about it. So the next generation will have the use of that resource too.
All right, here. Well, Dr. Enrique Delcampo from Bowling Green State University, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, that was nice. And one of the points that I really like to say over and over again is that we have people that know these things, and it's too often that the policy decisions get separated from the knowledge. That lots of times the people who know how these things work aren't the people that are having the kind of input into the decisions that need to happen. So,
just kind of what the whole thing that environmentalists do is to try to connect the academic and the policy thing.
Right.
Although it's mostly on the policy end that the connection is resistant.
Yeah. Right. The scientists aren't the problem.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
They would really like to talk about stuff they know about. Everybody likes to talk about stuff they know about.
They do.
Yeah.
And I like to talk to people who know stuff. That's one of my great pleasures in life.
It can be fun. Yeah. Tickles your brain good.
All right. Another great pleasure is promoting our sponsors here on For a Green Future.
Indeed.
And this show is being sponsored by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restore wildlife habitats, and they lead people on outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and nature preserves around Wood County, and those are open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every single day of the year. And there's a couple different ways to get a hold of the Wood County Parks and see what's going on. One is you can call them at 419-353-1897. That's 419-353-1897. Or you can go to their website, which is simply wcparks.org. Or you can download their nifty app. You go to the App Store and you search for WC Parks. It's a free app, and they'll tell you all sorts of wonderful and amazing things that they're doing out there at the Wood County Park District. So our program is also sponsored by sponsors, and those are people who have gone to patreon.com, Patreon, and they've just signed up to give a small monthly donation. It doesn't hurt at all. You could just keep it within whatever budget you have, and we thank them very much. We're very appreciative. We couldn't bring you this show without the support of our patrons. And so please consider becoming a patron. Just go to go to patreon.com. Yeah, first go to patreon.com.
Right.
Then go to WC Parks and see how you can, celebrate and have a good time because you feel so good because you've become a patron.
Indeed.
For a Green Future. All right, so those are our sponsors. And now on to the rest of the show. Okay, so one thing, this is the part of the show where we like to talk about some things that are eco things in the news. And one thing I wanted to talk about was the big thing, that the Trump administration has done in his, and I have to say it, in his war on the environment was this past week. It was widely reported that Trump has rolled back protections on wetlands. and he has basically...
Of course he has.
Yeah. I mean, we have come to understand that wetlands and seasonal water, streams and things are essential to having water that's drinkable, lakes that are swimmable and fishable. And so there were protections placed on wetlands.
So it has something to do with them being like a buffer that kind of like absorbs the bad stuff before it can get to the main body of water. Is that it?
Oh, yeah.
It also protects like the land from the ocean, too, at the same time.
Yes, wetlands do an amazing number of things. Wetlands are often one of these recharge points that Dr. Enrique was talking about. And they clean the water. Wetlands actually, because the dirty water, the contaminants flow through the plants, and the plants catch the contaminants, and then the little bacteria that are in the wetlands eat the contaminants. And so the water that flows through a wetland, by the time it gets to a lake or a stream, is quite clean. And they serve as places for fish and amphibians to hatch their young. And so we need frogs. We need wetlands to have frogs and things of that nature, and then we need frogs to have fish. And so it's all very essential to life, but it gets in the way of certain people making a lot of money. So what Trump has done is he has redefined a whole bunch of wetlands as not being wetlands. It's kind of like the tactic he used with nuclear waste, where he took the high-level deadly radioactive waste and is just saying, that's not high-level radioactive waste. It's just low-level radioactive waste. Roughly, he signed a bill, or he signed an executive order this past week that cuts the amount of protected wetlands roughly in half.
Yay.
And
let me guess, they still pretty much have to be drained and pumped and stuff if you want to do stuff. Let's go drain that non-wetland.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That you still have to. They're still full of water.
It will still ruin your shoes really quickly.
Right. And they still have the plants and animals that wetlands have.
Right.
It's just that they're no longer considered wetlands by the Trump administration. And he is using the farmers to justify this. He's saying it's getting in the way of farming. And the Farm Bureau he gave a big speech at the Farm Bureau saying, "Isn't this wonderful? I've eliminated all these wetlands." But in actuality, the farmers were already exempt from most of these regulations because of the nature of farming. And so what he was really fighting for, and who's really benefiting, the ones who applied for 90% of the permits to destroy wetlands, which they no longer have to apply for those permits, they can just destroy them without asking, are real estate developers. So it's not
right.
It's not
yeah.
the home, the close to the earth guys who care about the environment, farmers.
It's not your little family farm.
No, 90% of the destruction.
Not even a big farm.
It's going to be the pavers, the guys who want to just fill in the wetland and pave it over. And what happens if you do this enough? Like I said, often wetlands are these recharge points for the aquifers that we were talking about. And last summer, there was a city in India called Chennai. And Chennai is a place where they applied the Trump rules. They basically said, all these wetlands which aren't wet all the time, that's one of the key things is that he's doing seasonal wetlands are now no longer wetlands, because sometimes they're dry. So Chennai, the city of Chennai, allowed their real estate developers to just pave over everything wherever they wanted to. And I can see the expression on your face, Rebecca. You can tell this
Did Chennai flood like crazy?
Well, what it did is it ran out of water.
Oh, yeah. Even better.
In June 2019, the sixth largest city in India, there was no water to be had.
Oh, geez.
The taps had run dry for months.
Wasn't someplace in South Africa just about to do that?
Yeah, there was some.
Cape Town or something.
It's not unique, but this is what happens when you ignore science the way the Trump administration is ignoring science and allow wetlands, even these seasonal wetlands, to be paved over.
So they reimplanted Chennai's ectopic pregnancy is what I'm hearing, basically.
Same sort of principle. And so what happened in Chennai
with predictable results.
It was kind of incredible because Chennai is this big high-tech hub. They're India's Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
And so they have, billions of dollars a year economy based on software development and high-tech stuff. But nobody could go to work because there was no water at the office to drink or to flush the toilets But remember,
implementing environmental regulations is too expensive.
Well, and it turned into, in June and July of 2019, Chennai was essentially becoming the Mad Max Thunderdome.
Yeah.
Literally, there were gangs that were each controlled, like the city water tap. Like there were a few taps that were still running.
Right.
And so those were being controlled by gangs.
Mm-hmm.
And so you literally had to pay a gang to go fill a gallon of water because your taps didn't work.
Yeah.
And then there were also people that had water trucks that were coming in, but the quality of that water sucked because there were no controls on them. And people were so desperate for water, they were drinking.
Get that from any place.
They were drinking anything.
Wow.
And Chennai was literally on the verge of collapsing into civil war and chaos. But then they got good rains in the fall, and they've recovered from that. But the basic problem remains. And so if they don't uncover all those wetlands, the next time there's a drought, they're going to be back in that situation. A city of millions of people with no water, and we don't want to.
And this is not in the desert or something, is it? Is Chennai like traditionally a desert area?
Well, Chennai is a fairly dry area, but it's on the coast. It's actually on the coast, and they actually that little bit of water that they had was from desalination plants. And so they were taking water from the ocean, but that is an expensive, slow process, and it could only provide a tiny fraction of the water the city actually needed. So it's not desert. It's on the coast, but it's not a wet area. It's semi-dry. But if they husbanded their aquifers, they would have enough water. But instead, they paved them over. So, yeah.
Well, like Toledo, we're perched on the lip of a gigantic body of fresh water, and yet we have managed to somehow run out of water by poisoning it mostly.
Yeah.
There's always a way.
So that was the big eco news this past week. Trump's redefining wetlands as not being wetlands, and Trump, his war on the environment, as we know, has many, many fronts. But he is actually, since this is a campaign year, since he's facing re-election in 2020, he has begun saying the good environmental things. And one thing he did was at Davos, he gave a big speech. He's joining this worldwide effort to plant like 1 trillion trees, which sounds great, And yes, we should definitely be planting trees. But the reason this is what we call greenwashing is because at the same time he's joined this move to plant all these new trees, he is still cutting down the old trees at an incredible rate. He has opened national monuments to logging, which had been protected. He's opened national parks, and he's opening national forests that had all been protected, and he's opened them up. So the thing about cutting down an old tree, a tree that's already up, that tree literally has sequestered tons of carbon. All that wood that the tree is made out of, that's carbon that came out of the atmosphere. And so when you cut down the old trees, you actually release more carbon than you do planting a new tree, because the new tree is this little thing.
Wow.
It's got to grow. It's going to take 10, 15 years before it has sequestered a substantial amount of carbon, whereas that older tree, the 30, 50, 100-year-old tree, has already sequestered tons. And it's all part of the way it sequesters it is in the ground around it, the forest floor.
Oh, okay, I was going to ask.
Yeah, so all the leaves that have fallen over all those years, all the pine needles that have piled up, those are also tons and tons of carbon. And when you cut the forest down, all that carbon in the tree and all the carbon on the forest floor get released back into the atmosphere. So So Trump has said, hey, we're going to plant 1 trillion new trees, which is great, except that he's also cutting down more. So net, he's just messed up on this whole
also
tree issue.
In these days when the water and the soil is under attack and we have all these floods and hurricanes and things, it's a difficult time to be a new tree.
So all I'm saying is that when a politician...
Fires also. Lots of fires. It's not your best time to start life as a tree, I'm just saying.
True. So all I'm saying is when a politician like Trump starts talking about planting trees, you have to look at it in the context of everything he's doing.
Yeah,
and it's very close to election time. So, all right. Well, we're moving right along here. And Rebecca, was there something you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yeah. Well, okay, this week, it occurred to me that I am tired of winter, and I think I know I'm a wuss. It's only just started in many ways, but I am. Okay, I am. I think I'm probably not alone in that. We're almost coming up on the time when in my household we always got the Burpee seed catalog and got to look at all the nifty stuff. But yeah, an alternative to that would be native plant gardening, which I had heard about, where you garden with plants that are adapted specifically for your area and traditional to your area. I just thought it was a good thing because something about, it discourages you shouldn't plant possibly invasive species, but no, lots of other reasons why native plant gardening is good. You don't need any fertilizer for that. You can use a lot less water and pesticides. You really don't have to cut them very much. You don't have to be out there with your shears a lot. They provide food and shelter for local butterflies, bees, animals, blah, blah, blah. Also, the deep root systems of the native plants help soils store more water because it prevents erosion and flooding, and there's been also you don't have to move them for far away, so they don't use up carbon. Oh, no mowing. You don't have to use up a lot of carbon fuel for that, and contact your local native plant societies. They're all over the place.
Yeah. And also the Wood County Parks has a native plant sale every
spring. Like them, for example, right? Yeah.
And we have a caller.
Yay!
Hooray, caller. Welcome to For a Green Future.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, depending on where you're listening. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to let your listeners know that this Tuesday, January 28th at 10 a.m., down at the Federal Courthouse on Spielbush Avenue in Toledo, the Lake Erie Bill of Rights gets to go to court again. Yay!
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And the City of Toledo will be defending the Lake Erie Bill of Rights that we passed last February by a 61% margin of voters, and we'll be fighting against the state of Ohio and Drevis Farms, who is a big factory farm outlet down here in Northwest Ohio. And so we want as many people who have time and ability to come down to the courthouse on Tuesday and help us fill the courthouse with supporters of the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. Because we want the state of Ohio to know that we like clean water. And so the more people we can get there and showing up, smiling, I don't know. It may or may not change the judge's ruling. It's actually a hearing, so most things are in the judge's hands. But we can at least make a good showing of support.
All right. That's great. What time was that again on Tuesday?
It's 10 a.m. on Tuesday, and I believe it's courtroom 209, but it's the federal courthouse on Spielbush.
Uh-huh. And so, I mean, what happened was Toledo passed the Lake Erie Bill of Rights, and then the state stuck in a budget bill, I believe, a little provision that revoked it. And so do you know exactly what this court case is based on? I mean, what are they – is it to
Yeah, the legal things are kind of beyond me. I'm not a lawyer or a paralegal, but it's a lot of technicalities right now that the state says we don't have the right to citizen initiative, that we didn't have the right to actually have the Lake Erie Bill of Rights in the first place, and therefore it can't be enforced. And then, of course, we're coming back and saying we are a democracy and we have the right to citizen initiative in Ohio. It's in our Ohio state constitution, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
And so we do have the right to go to court, and we do have the right to say we want clean water. So there's a lot of technicalities. I'm not sure I've explained that very well, but it's come down to this at this point. So this may or may not be the end, of course, of court, wrangling, but
all right.
Just another step in the game, I guess.
All right. Well,
I just want to encourage people to show up and to demonstrate that we do like clean water here.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the call.
Thank you.
All right. Have
Thank
a
you.
great day. All right. Well, so something to put on the to-do list for Tuesday, I guess.
And this is the thing. Okay, isn't this actually like the first rights of nature type law in America?
It's
Did anyone pass?
if it's not the first, it's like the second. It's definitely one of the very first. Yeah.
Right. We get all this credit for being a conservative state, but nobody else has done this.
Yeah.
One other state has
That
done
is something Toledo could be proud of.
Yeah.
All right. Well, another thing we can be proud of is our letter from the future,
this. Indeed.
which comes every week, and I'm very proud of my great-great-granddaughter, a bacteriologist who's this right now she's writing from Mars. Dear great-great-grandpa, I am in the middle of a disaster. The third Martian colony has failed. You remember last week I told you that I was being pressured to join a secret scheme to terraform Mars by releasing Earth microbes onto the Martian surface. I was torn because I knew that rushing ahead with terraforming without careful planning and modeling could be a disaster, and it turned out I was right. This past Wednesday, I was back in Bill Ryderson's office. My brother Sam was there too. They were both pressuring me to join their scheme, and I have to admit I was starting to waver. Bill Ryderson is an extremely persuasive man, and we were in his office for 3 hours, and then all of a sudden he had an answer for every objection I had. His biggest argument was that the process was already started, so the question now wasn't if we should be doing it, but how it should be done. He was droning on, and Sam and I were sitting there nodding, and then I shook my head. I started feeling sleepy, and an alarm went off, warning low pressure, a computer voice said. I'm running out of time, so I got to summarize here. Basically what happened is the bacteria they had released had eaten the pressure dome, and caused leaks, and now all the pressure domes on Mars are failing, and so they had to basically run into the metal containment that had been there from the beginning. So everybody's crowded in these cramped little places, and Mars has to be abandoned because of this short-sighted scheme to try to terraform without.
So we'll be hearing from Marie on Earth next week, probably.
Well, she'll be on her way back.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's the latest update. Sorry we didn't get to read it in detail, but happy and grateful that you listened to us. This is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
Signing off.